So welcome everyone to the National Association of Environmental Medicine webinar series. We're really excited to have you here today. The National Association of Environmental Medicine, we are a community whose mission is to advance the knowledge of environmental medicine for healthcare providers through education, information, and inspiration. One of the reasons we're here today. A quick announcement before we get started. On June 6, 2020, coming up very soon, the National Association of Environmental Medicine will be hosting a live one-day conference. And yes, you can earn up to 7 CME credits, so that's exciting. We will be covering environmental medicine basics, share the best up-to-date testing and treatment options, and provide new insights into diagnosing and managing environmental illness with an immunotoxicity lens. This information will give you the tools that you need to be an effective clinician in this emerging and very dynamic field. It's free to all new or existing members, and you can learn more on our website, which is envmedicine.com. Again, envmedicine.com. And just, you know, having the basics when it comes to environmental medicine, having the tools to really understand it and be able to get the information that you need from your patients or your clients to accurately assess what might be going on as, you know, one of the underlying causes of their chronic illness is so important. And the environmental medicine, our conference will help you to do that. And again, give you the tools you need to do that, which is really important. So before I introduce our speaker today, I just want to let you know that we are going to have about 10 minutes at the end of the presentation for Q&A. So you can go ahead and type questions as we go along in the Q&A panel, and we will be happy to answer any questions you have. Also, please stay on till the end, because that's when Dr. Maddux will be introducing the promo code for a free detox panel when you purchase one. So let's go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Dr. Michelle Maddux received her doctorate of naturopathic medicine from the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in Tempe, Arizona, and her Bachelor of Science in Business Management from the University of Phoenix. She is the Director of Product for ToolBox Genomics and former Senior Manager of Medical Education at Genova Diagnostics. She is the founder of Soaring Phoenix, a consulting firm dedicated to educating clinicians on the fundamentals of integrative and functional medicine. She is passionate about changing the paradigm of medicine and stopping the epidemic of complex chronic disease. Dr. Maddux focuses on nutrition and integrative medicine in female adolescents, women, and in eating disorders. Michelle lives in the beautiful Sonoran Desert, and she loves reading, baking, crafting, and secretly doesn't mind being the only female in a house full of her 2 young boys, husband, and 3 dogs. Are your dogs also male?
1 male dog and 2 females, but they're really very tomboy.
Okay.
There's not a lot of female energy in our house.
Well, we're excited to have you here. We really are. And it's all yours now. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today. We will save, as she said, some time at the end for Q&A, so please be sure to jot down your questions and we'll get to as many as we can. The brief overview of learning objectives. We're going to do a brief overview of the role that SNPs play in the body, highlight the role of SNPs in detoxification and the regulation of detoxification pathways, understand how to utilize genetic test results, and learn how to build a comprehensive protocol for patients incorporating those SNP results. I always like to start with a brief overview of terminology. This should be a review, and you can go back to it during the recording to refresh your memory. We're going to go pretty quick. So a gene is a single unit of heredity. You get one from each parent, and that's what makes up your DNA. Genetics is the study of the genes and their mechanism of action and how they're inherited. Genomics is a high-level study of all of those genes and how they interact with each other. Epigenetics is a high level study of those things, but how they're modified based on the environment that they're in. So modifying the actual gene expression. A chromosome is where the DNA is coiled. A base pair are those rungs of the ladder, the two chemicals coming together, two amino acids. A variant is exactly what it sounds like. It is something that is not the standard. And an allele is a variant form of a gene. And risk allele is the allele that carries the risk for a certain disease or a certain outcome. I am very visual, and so I buzz through that DNA, the terminology slide, and go straight to this picture slide. So as you see here, the DNA refresher, it is the deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the DNA, the two amino acids coming together. When I talk about DNA and SNPs, I always reference Jurassic Park. If you have seen the first one, there's that beautiful scene in the beginning with him talking to people about, you know, bingo, dino DNA, and they've got this lovely graphic of the double helix and all that stuff. When I'm giving this talk in person, I can also tell how old people are, because the people who are around my generation, face lights up when they see and hear me talking about Jurassic Park, and everybody younger than me, that goes right over their heads and they don't know what I'm talking about. So the DNA, it encodes information passed down from generation to generation. G, guanine, tends to pair with C, which is cytosine, and adenine pairs with thymine, so CG and AT. Humans have about 3.2 billion base pairs. And in that picture, you can see it's that double helix. You've got the sides of the ladder, and then you've got those two amino acids coming together. For a SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism, that is when, and you can see on the picture, those two amino acids that come together, we know that C always pairs with G and A always pairs with T. However, in the situation of a SNP, you have an unexpected finding, or there's an unexpected pair. So on the top example, you see it in this one person, it is CG. However, in this other person, it's actually AT. These comings together code for usually enzymes. Most of them have no impact. We literally have hundreds of thousands of these in our bodies. However, some do impact the way that we respond to drugs, the way that we respond to certain dietary intakes, whether we are more or less susceptible to an environmental toxin. They do definitely increase risk of certain types of disease, how we respond to exercise, and we are learning more about the impacts of SNPs literally every single day. The one thing that I have to say before I dive into the cases and how we use them is, your genes are not your destiny. This comes back to that epigenetics. It is a piece of the puzzle, and we have to take into consideration not just your genes, but the environment that you bathe them in, the choices that are being made, and you come together all of those things, and in the middle you have what is your health. So please, for yourself and for your patients, don't get too freaked out by the things that you're seeing when you're running these genetic tests. So specifically, I'm with ToolBox Genomics, so I'm going to focus in on our reports. How do you read a report? They are sectioned into the Health Action Plan, which is really focused on what do you do about it and what is it? And it's typically what is leveraged in the conversation that people have with patients. It's what they use to educate their patients. There's the recommendation sections, so supplements that are recommended, lifestyle modifications, exercise, those are all based on the genetics of that particular person. And then there's the practitioner detail, which goes into the PMIDs, the research grades, and really it's a good point for people who want to jump in and start in on their own research on a particular SNP for a patient. So this is an example of the practitioner summary, and it's for the detox panel. And so you can see here in the middle, we list the trait. All of our panels are divided up into trait, which you can think of traits as a specific either chief complaint or a specific diagnosis or one of those underlying conditions. We have all of the genes. So again, that's the big chromosome, the gene, and then the SNP or the RSID is that single base pair coming together. And then we have the clinical significance statement. So that's the why do you care as the practitioner, the patient's test results, what the impact of that SNP is within this trait. Certain SNPs within different traits have different impacts. Something that is A high impact in inflammation, for example, may be a low impact in estrogen metabolism. We give the research grade, so a high, medium, or a low research grade, and then a couple PMIDs to get you guys started if you are the person who wants to really dive into that literature. So again, high level, you guys know this very well, I'm sure. So just that overview of the phases of detoxification. Phase 1, we're coming through on our CYP enzymes, the CYP 450s, and we have basic nutrients that are required for those to be able to function at an optimal level. We have intermediate metabolites. Those intermediate metabolites tend to be more toxic than the original things that we took into the body. Those then go through phase 2 detoxification. There's a number of ways that we go through phase 2 detoxification, and there are a number of supplements and micronutrients that are essential for phase 2 detoxification. And then from there, they're excreted. One of the biggest things that I always point out when I'm talking about this particular slide is this is talking about 2 arenas for detoxification. It is talking about stool and it is talking about urine. We have to remember that those are not the only 2 ways in which we detoxify. And as a naturopath, what was drilled into us is make sure that the emunctories are open before you detoxify anybody. And by that, we mean make sure that they are having regular bowel movements, because so many things are excreted in stool. Make sure that people are urinating frequently. They're not withholding it. They're emptying their bladder. Make sure that they're sweating. This is why one of the things that we always talk about is far infrared saunas and detoxification. Make sure that they're breathing well, because we do excrete some toxins via breath. All of those secretions from the body help us rid ourselves of toxins in one way, shape, or form. So before you detoxify someone, you want to make sure that all of those methods are working and they're working well. So let's talk about the first case study. She's a 37-year-old female, and her chief complaint is that she is not able to lose weight. She's actually hit a wall. Her present medical history: she has fibroids, she's obese, she is experiencing constipation. For her, that is 1 bowel movement every 2 or 3 days. She doesn't think that's abnormal. She's had that pretty much her whole life. She is tired and she is getting frequent headaches. She has a strong family history of obesity. Her mom, dad, sister, aunts, uncles, literally everybody in her family has some level of obesity, all the way up through, morbidly obese. There's coronary artery disease in her family, and there's also addiction issues in her family. Her BMI is 33, which is definitely in the obese category, but it's not horrible. I like to always do waist to hip ratio, and hers is actually a 1.8, which tells a little bit of a different story than the BMI. She's a former athlete. She played volleyball and softball all through her younger years and all the way through, actually literally through graduate school. Recently, for the last probably 5 to 8 years, she has not been doing any sports, and she hasn't really been exercising, and she really, really misses it. She's on albuterol as needed. She has a little bit of difficulty breathing, but it's not frequent enough to prompt her traditional clinician to put her on like a maintenance inhaler. She used to be on blood pressure medication. She had some issues, but she changed her diet and she was able to get off of those medications about 3 years ago. She changed her diet and she was able to incorporate just a low level of exercise, and she dropped weight. However, with no other changes since then, she has not continued to lose the weight. She dropped enough and she's really plateaued, and she hasn't backslid on her dietary changes. She's actually been really good. She has what we would call like a decent diet. She does eat a fair amount of fruits and vegetables. Her snacks tend to be, raw carrots and snap peas and, a couple of squares of cheese or something like that. She does eat lean meats. She does tend to be lower carb. She has zero visibility around organic. Her response is, I buy what's on sale, which is not uncommon. She works long hours. Her job, she's kind of the equivalent of a traveling accountant. So think of a traveling nurse who bounces around to different job sites every, like 12 to 24 weeks. This is her. So she literally lives in a hotel or like an extended stay type facility. And she works in a trailer at construction sites. So she does this traveling accounting for construction companies. She goes in and audits them. Because of this, she really lives her job. She is not at home with family very often. She is not surrounded by friends and family very often. She is on the job site in the little trailer working, and then she is back at her hotel for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time, predominantly sedentary. She claims no mental and emotional issues. She said, sometimes at work, if there's a deadline, I get nervous about that, but that's it. But she won't go there. Anytime I try to query, how do you feel about, being on your own so much? How do you feel about being away from your family? You're very close to your family. Is that difficult? She's like, it's just the way it is. And so she just won't go there. And she uses all of the things. I don't know how you guys document this in your chart notes. For me, I literally write down in all capital letters, all period, the period things. And what that means to me is if I query, she uses the beauty products with all of the horrible stuff. She uses the plastic cups and silverware. She uses the scented candles and Febreze and like all the things. I do make sure to really pay attention to anything that a person says specifically. For her, we were talking about her healthcare products and beauty products and the things that she uses around her house. And she specifically said, I travel with scented candles and I keep them going all the time, whether it's in the hotel room or in the trailer that I work in. I always have one of those scented candles going. So what I know, one, is that she's exposed to the chemicals from that 24/7. And two, I know that anything I do has to replace her scented candle. I can't just take it away. I have to also then replace it. Because it may be a ritual. It may be that the scent reminds her of something and makes her happier. I need to figure that out, and I need to make sure that I keep that in her life. I'm going to go on a little soapbox here on the waist to hip ratio. You can come back to this. I promise I won't spend very long. For her, if you remember, her BMI was a 33, wasn't horrific, but it is definitely falling into the obese category. But her waist to hip ratio, so the thickest part of her waist measured against the thickest part of her hips, was actually 1.08, which means that she has kind of a male body shape, which is this reverse triangle, which is incredibly high risk for diabetes, stroke, a number of things. And frankly, we really get concerned about seeing that in a female. So you can come back to this in the recording. How do you review the test with a patient? I always focus on the health action plan. The verbiage in that is written at a non-practitioner level. It includes the recommendations, and the focus is on the so what and the why do you care, not necessarily on the you have SNPs, A and C, and you should have, AT here, because most patients don't understand what you mean when you talk about that. And any level of education on your part, they tend to, deer in headlights on you. So I really like to focus in on why do you care and what are we going to do about it? It has individual trait detail pages, and we'll look at those in a little bit. If you want to pull one of those out and just focus on a protocol for that, it really is what is most commonly covered with a patient. We do also do a client detailed appendix, which literally it's just the facts, ma'am. It is the trait, it is the SNP, and that's it. And I'll show you one of those later in the second case and talk to you a little bit about when you would focus on that and not the health action plan. So for this particular individual, this is her detox panel. Anytime I hear someone say that they were losing weight and they hit a wall, I think detox, right? We know that we store toxins predominantly in adipose tissue. And so there's some theories out there that people who hit the wall when trying to lose weight, it's actually a protective mechanism because their body's not wanting to let those toxins go. There's also, coming into the estrogen detoxification and coming into, how are we dealing with those things? We also know that our adipose tissue can be somewhat estrogenic, which can promote weight gain. So this is the first thing that I think about when I have someone in my office saying, I hit a wall. I can't seem to progress. So estrogen metabolism, this is one of the first things we look at on the detox. And for her, you see that this is a high impact trait. And on the test, the traits are in this high, medium, and low category. I tend to tell people to focus in on the traits that are scoring high for that person. That's where the goal and the biggest impact for you as a practitioner are. So for her estrogen metabolism, you see that she has SNPs in the CYP1A1. Again, that's that phase 1. That's that very first phase 1 metabolism. And what that results in is a reduced ability to break down steroid hormones, PAHs, and xenobiotics, because this particular SNP means that this enzyme, the CYP1A1 pathway, it goes slower. And so you're going to get a backlog of those things that are coming in. She also has a glutathione, so her GSTM, she has a SNP in that. She had GSTM and GSTP SNPs. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's the glutathione system. And we know glutathione helps us break down xenobiotics. SNPs in this are associated with higher rates of asthma. You know, glutathione and lower levels of glutathione have been associated with higher rates of asthma. It's one of the reasons that Tylenol is contraindicated with people who have asthma, because Tylenol depletes glutathione. And so for this particular person, you know, one of the things that I did is I look at these estrogen pathways, right? So again, little review of estrogen. We've got our parent hormones coming in, right? We've got our cholesterol, pregnenolone, DHEA. We have our couple different kinds of estrogen. We know that pregnenolone goes back and forth to progesterone, and we can also create testosterone in this pathway. In the little blue writing, you see the enzymes, the CYP enzymes, and some of the beta HSD enzymes. So now we're coming through to the estrogen elimination, and you see this estradiol, so E2, it goes back and forth to E1, and we see E1 via CYP1A1 for her, it goes into this 2-hydroxyestrogens, which are typically considered a good estrogen, you know, quote unquote, good estrogen metabolite. And her CYP1A1 pathway goes slower. So now we get a backlog of E1 and E2 because everything in life goes down the path of least resistance. That also means that E1 and E2 are going to go to the other pathways, right? They're going to go down the CYP3A4 and the CYP1B1. And now those are where you come into the bad and the ugly. You know, I tend to look at the 2 as the good, the 16 alpha hydroxy, which is, I don't know if you guys can see my pointer, but this one right here, that's the bad. And the 4 hydroxy is the ugly. And so for her, she's going to have a higher propensity to dump into these bad and ugly estrogens. The 4 hydroxy goes to quinones, and that they have been strongly associated with increased rates of cancer. So we definitely know that we want to target this enzyme working better. Again, we come into how do you get rid of estrogens? And estrogens are excreted, so the metabolites of estrogens are excreted via feces, so via stool. So again, this particular person is not having regular bowel movement. She is constipated. When you're constipated, those things that are packaged for excretion by your body in stool have the opportunity to then be recirculated throughout the body. So now we have someone who is overweight, has a high degree of adiposity, which is estrogenic. We have her dumping towards the bad and the ugly metabolites, and we have her most likely recirculating those metabolites because she's also constipated and therefore not excreting them, even when her body tries to metabolize them the correct way. She also has a CYP1B1 SNP. So unfortunately for her, this is not a downregulation. This is actually an upregulation. So people with this particular SNP, it means that their CYP1B1 goes faster. And again, if you look down at this diagram here at the bottom, that CYP1B1 is right in the middle, and it dumps to the ugly estrogen. It dumps to the 4-hydroxyestrogens, which go to the quinones. And again, that's associated with predominantly increased risks of hormone-mediated cancers. We know that other things that go down this particular pathway, again, the PAHs, and a number of other xenobiotics. And so she's slow in this pathway that we would prefer her to go down. So she's got a backlog of her parent estrogens, and now she's got an increase of this other estrogen that's a path of least resistance. And it's not an outcome that we really want for her. On this particular next high impact trait, we look at glutathione. And glutathione is an amazing antioxidant in the body. It is primary for detoxification. The GST enzymes are responsible for a reduction in the body's ability to make and regenerate glutathione. We have to remember from the glutathione perspective that it also passes, glutathione gets input from the SOD system, so from the superoxide dismutase system. And the glutathione system, we need it to work really well. Otherwise, we get this backlog from superoxide dismutase, which is the first step in that phase 2 for many of our toxins. This is especially challenging for anybody who's on any form of a medication, because most of them go through that glutathione conjugation, if you remember way back on that liver enzyme picture. She also has a lot of inflammation SNPs. And I get questions all the time about why inflammation is included in a detoxification panel. And I always think about it like this. What happens during detoxification? It tends to be people feel a little crummy. You're upregulating some of their inflammatory processes, because now suddenly, instead of being in storage, all of these things are now being circulated in the body, and you're expecting the body to be able to work through them. This particular person has TNF alpha SNPs, which will result in an increased inflammatory response. She also has IL-6 SNPs, again, increased inflammatory response. So you start mobilizing things with someone who has this type of a SNP picture, and they are going to have an exaggerated response to anything that you do to them, unless you include anti-inflammatory and inflammatory modulating aspects to your protocol. Some people, when they look at someone with this SNP picture, will actually, before they do any detoxification at all, obviously stop what's coming in, right? So stop all the things and talk about that. But before they do active detoxification, they will do a period of anti-inflammatory supplements, anti-inflammatory diet, anti-inflammatory lifestyle to try to get that down. We know that inflammation is also, chicken or egg with obesity. So really, really paying attention to the patient's inflammation reactions and how long it takes you to quell those, and making sure that within that detoxification protocol, you have the person on. Prior to it, you've come in with good inflammatory support. During the protocol, you're supporting their inflammation pathways. And then after, you're helping to still keep that down. When someone has that increased inflammatory reaction, it is uncomfortable and miserable for them. And it has ramifications beyond detoxification, right? It impacts all of their body systems. And if they tend to then not be compliant because they feel horrible, and nothing that you're doing is working to make them stop feeling horrible, and powering through with this person doesn't quite work, because at a SNP level, their inflammatory response is overactive and doesn't calm down like everybody else's. So you're going to have somebody who falls out of your program, basically, and they're not going to come back, and that doesn't help you, and it doesn't help them. Oxidative stress. This particular person, again, with the glutathione enzyme, so that's that reduced glutathione ability. She also has CDK and 2 enzymes. These particular enzymes are, these enzymes code for suppression of rapid cell proliferation, and they suppress division in older cells. When you suppress that enzyme, it means that older cells are able to proliferate at a higher degree, and it means that other cells are able to also proliferate at a higher degree. And so these can be associated with higher rates of certain types of cancers. Again, This is something, if you were trying to detoxify a patient who also happened to have a high family incidence of cancers, you would want to know this, because the enzyme that suppresses that proliferation is also suppressed, and you would want to support that. COMT. Big smile on my face. This is my absolute favorite enzyme. This is my favorite SNP in the world. And I realize how geeky I sound saying that I have a favorite SNP. So COMT, right? It is, most of us are familiar with this because it's methylation, and methylation is everywhere. Everybody is talking about methylation. And there's a reason why everybody is talking about methylation. And so COMT pathway, it degrades catecholamines. It is your dopamine, your epi, your norepinephrine. It degrades catechol drugs. Primarily drugs that are used in Parkinson's is where we see that. It also degrades your estrogens. And so why is it so fascinating? Because it is the primary, secondary detoxification pathway of so many of our biological processes. Think about it. How often are we talking about catecholamines and estrogens? Its expression is heavily modified by your environment. This is one where epigenetics comes into play so very heavily. Alterations in COMT are very implicated in many diseases, and it's associated with so many different pain symptoms, so many different symptoms. And specifically, the one that everybody knows about is this worrier. It's very difficult to say. People with a certain type of a COMT SNP tend to be more of the worrier, right? They're the brooding and the meditative, and they mull things over in their brain. People with a different type of COMT SNP tend to be the warrior. They are the ones who are going to charge right on through. They're going to break down that wall. They're going to go for it, right? What we see here, and I'm going to show a couple of pathways. So here is your catecholamines. And with COMT, you have 3 different options. You can be a fast metabolizer, a slow metabolizer, or normal. This is one of those interesting SNPs where normal is heterozygous, which means that you have 1 SNP but not 2. 2, whether it is the SNP or whether it is not SNP, are actually considered to be not preferred. It's a negative outcome. So the picture down on the bottom is showing our catecholamine pathways. So think about someone who is a fast metabolizer. They are going to blow through their epinephrine, their dopamine, their norepi very, very quickly. These are the types of individuals who tend to be adrenaline junkies, who tend to have addiction issues, because again, it's that adrenaline, right? They get the spike, but it doesn't last very long. Their body burns through it. And so they keep seeking out things to continue to give them that spike. People with a slow COMT, I like to joke that I can see them when they walk in my office or when I walk in a party. You can tell them, but not always. They have a backlog of epinephrine and dopamine and norepi. They tend to be your type A. They tend to be your warrior. They are the people who, once they are triggered, once they have a stressful event, they can't get out of it because their body cannot break down that dopamine and that epinephrine fast enough for them. So it just kind of circulates in their system. With the top picture, you're seeing the COMT is here on the far side of the screen, and it takes all of those secondary metabolites from your estrogens. After the CYP enzymes come in, the COMT methylates the estrogens, which methylation is something, at least from an estrogen perspective, I simplify it by saying, it pops a molecule on it, which makes it able to be excreted by the body. If we do not methylate it, it cannot be excreted. That's a very simplified approach. However, for this particular instance, if they are not able to methylate their estrogens, they're not going anywhere. So if they have a COMT that is slow, they're having a backlog of those hydroxyestrogens. Hopefully it's the 2s, but for this particular patient, it's going to be the 4s because her CYP1B1 was upregulated dumping to fours. Now, if they're a fast metabolizer from an estrogen perspective, potentially it's okay, right? They're going to be busting through those secondary metabolites and getting them packaged for excretion really quickly. If you look down at the very bottom, we also see that the COMT, right, it's in these methyl estrogens. This is coming into the genotoxicity. We see that it comes into play with the SAM and the SA. And so this is one of the reasons that you'll see people with COMTs, they tend to be recommended SAM-E as a supplement. I will say that when you have a slow COMT metabolizer, these are the people who, when you put them on SAM-E, they react very, very badly. Pay attention to that. What you want with COMT is you want average. It's one of the few times in life that we want average. We want the Goldilocks. We want it not too fast and not too slow. So for this particular individual, where am I going to start? I'm going to start on inflammation and oxidative stress because it's fundamental to her. The oxidative stress treatment will also encompass the glutathione and the superoxide dismutase because those are both antioxidants. And I'm also going to focus on estrogen metabolism, but if I start there without addressing inflammation and oxidative stress, she's going to be miserable and she's never going to continue with treatment, and that doesn't help her and it doesn't help me. So for this particular person, this is the supplement recommendations on the detox plan for her. The arrows are pointing to the things that I'm recommending. I really like these little vitamin packs that I get. And for this person, I'm putting her on one that's specific for women. And it has a higher mineral amount, which can help with detoxification. It has DIM. It has beta-glucuronidase or beta-glucuronidate, which can minimize the impact of things that are packaged for excretion being recirculated. It has a high amount of essential fatty acids, and it's got some good resveratrol and that kind of some additional antioxidants in it and some curcumin in it. So it packages it in a little highly portable, for this person who lives out of a hotel for 12 weeks at a time, package that she could just take with her. I also put her on a higher level of vitamin D. Right now she is working in a place with very little sun, and she doesn't go outside hardly ever. And I also put her on some liposomal to increase the absorption, vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. From a dietary perspective, I really want her to focus on cleanliness. I want her to focus on the organic as much as possible. I'm trying to get her to avoid the charred meats and the vegetables because of the SNPs that she has that downregulate that pathway. I'd like her to incorporate some garlic and some onions because it helps with quercetin without her having to take additional quercetin, and switch to herbal teas throughout the day. She drinks not a ton of sodas, but she tends to drink things like the vitamin waters or the Gatorades, and they're chock full of sugar and artificial colors, and that's not a good thing. I put her specifically on dandelion leaf and root. So the root is really great for constipation, and the leaf is a really good diuretic. So again, through food and through tea, I'm helping promote those detoxification pathways and opening those emunctories. I'm asking her to increase her snacks that are colorful. I did ask her to incorporate greater than 70% dark chocolate per day. That is super helpful with a lot of those antioxidant pathways, a lot of those oxidative stress pathways. And I put her on a modified, super simple version of an intermittent fasting protocol. So nothing to eat from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. She can have herbal teas, but nothing with cream or sugar. There's some really, really amazing data on obesity and, kind of the cluster of symptoms around obesity and intermittent fasting. For a lifestyle, I talked to her about all the things, right? I talked to her about sleep hygiene. You can come back to this. Paraben phthalates, you guys know all of that stuff. She was drinking everything out of plastic. We flipped that. Really honed in on do not heat in plastic, period, end of conversation. And I gave her recommendations for an app to help her with going to sleep and calming down at night, and talk to her about, no lights in the bedroom. If you have a night light, it should be red. The other spectrums of light mess up your melatonin secretion. So you really want to hone in on the ROI part of Roy G. Biv spectrum with any night lights. For exercise, she travels, right? She lives in a hotel 12 weeks and is home for maybe a week. So I encouraged her. There are a ton of apps and a ton of YouTube videos that do these little 15-minute workouts. She can travel with like a TheraBand or something. And I really stress to get outside. Go take a break, walk away from your desk and go for a walk for 20 minutes. Literally, do not come back. Even if all you're doing is walking in circles in the parking lot, go outside, take a breath, focus on you, and just go outside and breathe real air. At her 1-month follow-up, her constipation was completely resolved. She says she's feeling more alert. She hasn't had any headaches for 3 weeks. She's lost approximately 7 pounds since her last visit. It's not a lot, but it is forward momentum, so she's encouraged. The recommendation is to continue all of the supplements. I asked her to add warming or contrast hydrotherapy. It's something that's relatively easy to do while traveling. You can take 2 of the hotel washcloths, dunk them in ice water, put them on the belly and then wrap yourself up in the towels while you're watching TV at night. Something like that, because it's super simple. When she's at home, I asked her to please do castor oil packs over the liver to help spike that detoxification. I added a powdered fruit and green in nut milk to her regimen. The little travel shaker mugs are super easy. They are plastic. However, she's not heating anything in them, so I'm going to give her a pass. And then she's still having some insomnia, primarily because she sleeps in hotels so much. And I gave her a little bit of a sleep product because if you don't sleep, you don't function well. I'm going to buzz through case 2 here quickly. I'm cognizant of time. And case 2 is a super interesting individual. He's a 27-year-old male, and he has a strong family history of early onset Alzheimer's. His mom's parents had it. His mother is showing early signs. He is otherwise healthy. He is super fit. He's pretty active. He looks, when he walks in the office, fine. He does have some patches of eczema that he doesn't even notice. He didn't say anything to me about them. I didn't see them until I did an exam. He does a lot of yoga. It is predominantly more meditative, so focusing on his breath. He has a fairly clean diet. He's an ovo-lacto vegetarian. He does eat chicken a couple times a month. He strictly avoids any and all red meat. He strictly avoids any and all fish. He is terrified of the increased risk of Alzheimer's associated with having those in his diet at a higher degree, so he just doesn't have them at all. He is aware of the dietary need for fruits and vegetables, but he's not super cognizant about the implications of organic versus non-organic because he doesn't understand how that plays into dementia and Alzheimer's. I describe him as twitchy. He's high strung. He's not like sketchy twitchy or anything. He's just super high strung. He is in a high stress job in tech. He has long hours. They are irregular. He'll pull 26 hours and then not work for 5 or 6 hours and then hit another 8-hour day. But he's parked in front of his computer pretty much all day, every day. He takes a lot of supplements, lots in all capitals. He wouldn't even bring them in. He was like, there are too many to bring in. If he reads some newspaper article somewhere that said that a supplement might help with Alzheimer's, he goes to the health food store and he buys it and he starts taking it. He has a very low awareness of anything from a personal product perspective. He doesn't read labels on anything other than food, and even that's a little bit sketchy. He has little to no awareness around the fact that sleep and stress can play into the risk for Alzheimer's and dementia, and given his schedule, that would be a huge thing for him. And he does do some things for fun. He plays guitar, piano. He reads literally almost anything and everything he can get his hands on. He is completely terrified of getting Alzheimer's, like terrified. His primary motivator in life is to not get Alzheimer's. In the initial visit, before we did any testing, I did talk to him about the role that sleep plays in cognition and mood. I gave him some articles to read. He's the type of person you have to give him a project. Those types of patients, give them homework. Give them articles to read, give them websites to investigate, give them homework. They will love it. They will eat it up. It'll be great. I did discuss environmental toxins and the role that they play in cognition. He literally had no level of awareness, which was surprising given how intelligent he is and and how aware of so many other things he is. So again, sent him to, environmental working group, gave him some handouts, and, asked him to really hone in on those couple of things while we were waiting for his test results to come back. I did cognitive. It's a no-brainer. For him, looking at Alzheimer's risk and dementia from a genetic standpoint, and I had to look at detox. It's such a huge part of what is going on for him, and he's really not aware of it, and he needs some level of motivation to take it to the next step. This is his cognitive panel, and it's a pretty positive panel. I mean, you can see for these trait impact scores, which are this polygenic risk scores that we use on our panels, he had 7 traits on this that were high impact, and everything else was medium impact. That's a significant finding for him. On his detox, he had quite a few other traits that were also high. His COMT was average. His personality is a personality I expect to be a slow metabolizer because he was so high strung, so type A. It's one of the few times that I was wrong about a COMT finding. This particular person, I did not give him the health action plan because if I had done that, he would have seen the list of supplements. He would have walked over to his health food store with his list of supplements. He would have added those supplements to all the supplements he was taking. And that would have been the end of the story for he and I. That is not what I wanted. And I did not think that that would actually help him in any way. So I gave him the client summary, which, as you see here, there are no recommendations. It is just the facts, ma'am. It just tells him, what did we look for and what are the patient results? For us, we could look at this. Again, we're looking at his Alzheimer's risk. And this individual page is the Alzheimer's risk with specific activities to work on for, decreasing the risk of developing Alzheimer's. I'm absolutely going to point out ApoE. Everybody knows about ApoE and its risk of Alzheimer's. This lovely little graphic up here is beautiful because it helps you explain to yourself and to patients why ApoE4 is such a concerning finding. And then here you can see the the prevalence, like what's the likelihood that a person who has these findings are going to get Alzheimer's. And for him, finding out that he was E3, E4, that was a big deal. He had not had ApoE testing done before. He also had a BEN1. This is involved in the tau pathway, which has been strongly associated with Alzheimer's as well. He had a really high dementia finding, and the HLA gene is involved in this histocompatibility, and it is the self-non-self, right? This is my immune system recognizing myself, and now I know I don't have to mount an immune response. Versus this is my immune system, and it doesn't recognize self, and now it mounts this huge immune reaction to self. This particular SNP is strongly involved in dementia, and this sets the stage and helps people understand that inflammation, again, is such a key for people who have dementia and risk of dementia. He had, similar to the first patient, he had a ton of inflammation SNPs. He had IL-6, TNF-alpha, and IL-2/3R. So we see that for him, he's going to have a larger inflammatory reaction. That reaction is going to last longer, and he's not going to be able to self-regulate his immune system. So for any detoxification that I'm going to do with him, I know I must address inflammation before I do anything and throughout the entire protocol. Again, he had the CDKN2, that's the cell proliferation, and it regulates oxidative stress in multiple cell types. This is SOD. I am going to go into SOD with glutathione just quickly. So SOD takes that secondary metabolite, converts it to hydrogen peroxide, passes off the hydrogen peroxide to glutathione. Glutathione does its thing, and that metabolite is ushered out of the body. If SOD is impaired, it can't take the secondary metabolite fast enough. It gets a backlog. If SOD is upregulated, it's similar to COMT. If it's upregulated, then it passes the system, it passes that metabolite onto the glutathione system too fast. So it gets to be one of those like I Love Lucy conveyor belt issues, like with the chocolates. Either it's too slow and they're bored and they're kind of dancing around, or it's too fast and they're shoving them in their mouth and up their hat and throwing them over their shoulders. And it's so intertwined with glutathione. So you can't just look at SOD, you also have to look at glutathione, and you have to regulate those two systems together to get optimal results with the detoxification and supporting people through detoxification. He had a salt. This is sulfation, right? It's a huge detoxification pathway. It detoxifies, medications, hormones, neurotransmitters, xenobiotics, and it also does those heterocyclic aromatic amines. We definitely see this in higher rates in vascular dementia, which was something that for him is not quite as converting. We're not quite as concerned about that because most of his Alzheimer's, it's a straight Alzheimer's, it's not a vascular dementia. However, it also tells us we can't ignore that particular part of his case. So where do we start with him? I have to start with all of the dementia, cognitive impairment, and Alzheimer's, because that's what he came to me for. If I start with inflammation and oxidative stress, he's not going to come back. He's not going to follow the protocol, and he isn't going to come back. You have to meet the patient where they're at. You have to meet the patient with their chief complaint and help them resolve that. I'm also going to focus on that SALT and SOD because I did build a compelling argument for him on their relationship to dementia. And I'm also going to focus on the inflammation and oxidative stress, but that's not going to be my primary focus for him. When I run 2 panels at a time, I set them next to each other and I look for the commonalities. And so for him, what we see is there are actually a fair number of commonalities. And you can go back to the recording. I'm buzzing through, so we have time for questions. For him, I switched him to a multivitamin pack. I literally said, take all your supplements, bag them up, put them in a closet. I'm not going to ask you to throw them away right now, but trust me, just leave them alone for right now. Let's do this protocol and let's see how you feel. It is higher in B complex. It's got some alpha lipoic acid, some CoQ10s. I put them on curcumin and PEA. If you've not done any research into PEA, it is a phenomenal supplement. It helps with the cannabinoid system, and it is antioxidant, it is anti-inflammatory, and combined with curcumin, it helps to modulate stress and inflammation at the same time. I'm a big fan of supplements that I can get multiple actions out of with a single supplement. I put him on a super high dose of EFAs, 3,000 milligrams per day. And I also put him on D3 because he sits in front of his computer all day long and never goes outside. For diet, you can see, again, there's a good amount of overlap. So from a dietary plan, we focused on fruits and vegetables, educated about organic. I had him do golden milk. I'm a big fan of golden milk. It creates a ritual at night before bed, and it's an anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. Can sometimes in some people replace, that evening glass of wine or something like that. I asked him to be mindful of cooking technique. I put him on a smoothie every morning before he dives into work. He's I don't eat breakfast, I don't have time person. And you can pack a lot of punch into a smoothie typically, and it's beautiful and amazing. Lots of fruits and veggies, lots of fiber. And then I put him on a before bed bubble juice. The before bed bubble juice recipe is here. I do this with my family, actually. I do this with my children. And if you substitute licorice solid extract for the glycine, it becomes morning bubble juice. The glycine, though, at that dose is highly sedative. So this is something before bed, tastes really wonderful, gets a ton of antioxidants in just a glass of water. For lifestyle recommendations, it's intermittent fasting. He's already thin. I'm not super worried. It is reduced stress and it is sleep consistency. Did a lot of education on sleep hygiene. I told him to get outside and do something that brings him joy every single day, but it still had to be outside. And then we educated him on the things to avoid in his life. So parabens and phthalates and PAHs, etc. Exercise, keep the yoga, but bump it up a little bit and continue with weight training, go outside, throw around heavy things, anything to get that stress response down. Because if you remember, I thought he was a slow metabolizer of catecholamines. He was so on edge. He needs to go outside and throw heavy things around because he's having this cortisol spike and it doesn't have anywhere to go. Go throw heavy things. I do want to do urine metals. I do want to do serum EFA, salivary cortisol, and food sensitivity testing. For him, his eczema was totally gone at 1 month. He feels calm and sharp. He's fine with continuing to ignore his supplements, which is great. And I'm now going to focus on actually detoxifying him. So I'm throwing in some contrast hydrotherapy, and I told him to use his far infrared sauna on a daily basis. You can look at these. This is really, again, just going through, it's a combined approach, right? Your SNPs are not your destiny. It's all about your lifestyle and how you use that information and what you bathe your genes in. And this is a section on privacy. So let's go ahead and jump to questions.
Okay, well, thank you so
Sorry, that was a
much.
whirlwind.
No, thank you so much. It was really an excellent presentation. I learned a lot, and I loved all of your charts, especially the estrogen metabolism and COMT charts. That's one of my favorite SNPs too, by the way.
Oh,
I'm
good.
fascinated
I'm
with
glad
it.
I'm not the only one with a favorite SNP.
Yeah, and I do really appreciate you spending time on the case studies, because that's really how we learn, and how we learn how to apply all of this into our daily practice, right? So yeah, let me go. We have some questions up here, so I will just go in the order that I received them. Okay, so first one here, let's see, from Sean. He recently took a detox course with the Dr. Brian Walsh, and he found some research that suggests certain isolated constituents and high concentrated doses like curcumin and silymarin can actually inhibit detox pathways, while turmeric and milk thistle tend to stimulate detox pathways. Have you heard this before?
So this is where not everybody is the same. It's one of the reasons to run genetics, right? And the other thing is you need to be mindful about the form that you're giving people. So it's hard to get to a dose of the curcumin isolate if you are giving them it in its natural form. If you're using it as a spice, if you're using it as, a golden milk and you're pulling in turmeric, not the isolate of curcumin. And so anytime we work with botanicals, we tend to want to use them carefully and mindfully if it's an isolate, and if we can incorporate it in its natural form because it has many other compounds with it, that is usually what is preferred.
Yeah. And yeah, and it is the more we know about the person, like you said, the better we can determine those type of scenarios.
Exactly, like that SAMe with someone with a COMT. You just wouldn't use it. You're not going to get a good result.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then okay, now bringing up CMT, I actually have two questions from Stacy on CMT. Isn't giving Ritalin or other amphetamines to a patient with fast CMT like beating a stone for water? They are already depleted in catecholamines, and now the catecholamine neurotransmitters are being released very quickly, and they take a long time to replenish.
So Ritalin, it's an ADD, ADHD medication. And in people with ADD and ADHD, it has the opposite effect. That's why it's so very effective. And it absolutely is, it's a drug of abuse because it ups people, right? It's a form of methamphetamine. And so this is why you hear that classic, like, the mom abusing and taking the kids Ritalin. So that is where you would need to be very sure that the person who is taking the Ritalin is actually ADD and ADHD, because their brain uses those compounds in a very different way than a normal, healthy person.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then she also asked, can't you have a normal CMT but have MAO SNPs that slow down catecholamine metabolism?
Absolutely. So COMT is not, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear about that, COMT is not the only SNP that impacts the catecholamine pathways. As you saw in most of the pathway charts, there are multiple things going on. Our body is super duper smart, and there are other ways that things are detoxified. So yes, MAO is another one.
Okay, Great, thank you. Okay, another question from Jeremy. Are the impact scores and treatment recommendations always based on data on impact on clinical outcomes, or are they sometimes based on things like degree of in vitro impact or impact on protein expression alone?
So all of our recommendations are actually all of everything on our platform is all based on human studies, and they are specific to the person's SNP findings. And so they are what would be, what has been shown in the literature to either minimize that risk or positively enhance a positive outcome from a SNP.
Okay, great. And then just a couple of questions about the slides being available. Yes, we NAEM will definitely post this webinar on our website, so you'll have access to that. Just a quick note from Bonnie. Thank you. This was excellent. Best CMT outline I have seen.
Oh, thank you.
And then let's see. Also wanted to, it's already 6:01 p.m. and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. But Michelle, I would love for you to let people know about the wonderful offer that ToolBox Genomics has for our, all of our attendees today.
Absolutely. So for attending the webinar today, there is a special code. It is NAEM APR 2020. And with that code, you can get a buy one, get one free offer for any panel. I have the panels up here for you, and you can reach out to us on our website if you have any questions about signing up for an account. But the offer will get you one free panel when you order one panel. And that offer is good through May 29th. So you can use it with as many different people as you would like to use it with, including yourself, because that is how we learn. And please reach out if you have any other questions about that particular offer.
Okay, and just once just again, it's NAEM ARP 20, correct?
No, it's
sorry.
NAEM APR, the abbreviation for April.
Okay, got it.
2020. NAE, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to just put that in the chat box too so people can see it. Great. Okay, great. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your attendance, and we were lucky to have such a great presenter today. So thank you, Dr. Maddux.
Thank you.
And again, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the NAEM website, which again is ENV, so envmedicine.com, envmedicine.com. Okay, so thank you everybody. Have a wonderful evening. And thank you again, Dr. Maddux. It was a great webinar.
Thanks for having me. Have a great evening, everybody.
Bye.